Welcome to today's webinar. I'm Elena Greenfield, Keen Program Assistant. Shortly, I'll turn the webinar over to our presenter, Benson Garner. Benson is a strategy, innovation, and entrepreneurship consultant who has trained countless entrepreneurs, investors, educators, and enterprises. Benson's current projects include training and consulting with several Fortune 500 companies and teaching an entrepreneurship course to PhD candidates at Arizona State University. He is also a business model trainer and content lead at Strategizer. For some framing about this webinar, Keen is a program about entrepreneurial mindset, which is developed in tandem with skills. If you're new to understanding Keen concepts, learn more information through the magazine link found in your chat box, specifically pages 9 through 17. Benson will be discussing tools developed by Strategizer that can help a non-business person understand the relationships that exist in a business model. Its visual nature is ideal for engineers that want to connect their technical work to value proposition and all that surround it. The tool is right-sized whether used within an existing organization, government, nonprofit, or startup. During the webinar, we're going to wait to ask Benson questions until the end. Use your control panel's question entry box to ask questions. I'll be monitoring questions to ask Benson following his presentation. Okay, Benson, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Elena. So I'm pretty excited to be here with all of you today. As Elena mentioned, I've spent a good deal of time in entrepreneurship and innovation, and have spent a bit of time in consulting as well. So just a little background on myself. I got my, kind of cut my teeth in the world, so to speak, working in startups. So I started 2 of my own companies. Then I went to work in an accelerator program, actually at Arizona State University. And from there, while I was at the accelerator, I started developing some entrepreneurship curriculum specifically for the startup companies and teams that were going through our program. And we had some mentors from Intel come through, and one of the ladies basically approached me and said, "Hey, I love what you're doing with teaching these entrepreneurs. Do you think you could come into Intel and teach a big old stodgy organization like Intel how to be more quick and nimble, like an entrepreneur, like a startup company would be?" And I thought, man, that's a fantastic experiment. Let's go ahead and give it a try. And so that kind of that kind of started my consulting career. And since then, I've had the opportunity to work with companies of all sorts of shapes and sizes, from the entrepreneur in the garage all the way up to big companies like Intel, and everything in between, for-profit, non-profit, public entities. So it's been a really great experience, a lot of fun. But today I want to talk to you about some tools that that I've used a lot, both with businesses that are going concerns, but also with students in the classroom. And so here's my contact information real quick. If you guys if you have any questions after the webinar, maybe we don't get to your question or something like that, feel free to just schedule a call with me, and these slides will go out to you in an email. You can either reach out to me on Twitter at Benson Garner, or just with that link right there at the bottom, you can schedule a quick 30-minute chat with me, and I'm happy to get on the phone with you and have a quick conversation about either whether it be implementing these tools in your classroom, or where else might I be able to use these tools, or how would you use a specific tool. Just whatever the question is, feel free to reach out. So as Elena mentioned, I do a lot of work with an organization called Strategizer, and so all of the tools that I'll show you today, and a bunch of the slides, in fact, are coming to us courtesy of Strategizer Academy. And Strategizer is responsible for this book, The Business Model Generation. Many of you have probably seen it, or at least heard about it. The Business Model Generation was really it really kicked off an entire movement around business model design and development And in the book, there's a phenomenal tool, the Business Model Canvas, which is made up of 9 building blocks, and I'll talk to you about those in a little bit here. Now, what's interesting about this is that the book and the tool, the Business Model Canvas, have really become kind of this global phenomenon. Just to kind of put it in perspective, there's 11,000 new business books published every single year. And of those books, most of them only sell somewhere around 5,000 to maybe 7,500 copies, and most of those copies are purchased by the authors to give away to their family members, to their friends, clients, etc. But this book is pretty incredible because it's already sold over 1 million copies. It's been, it's been translated into more than 30 languages. It's used at more than 250 universities just in the U.S. And some of the top business schools and top engineering schools in the country. There's over 2,000 people that have been trained in Strategizers master classes, and the canvas itself, the business model canvas, has been downloaded. That number is actually out of date. It's probably over 3 million times just from Strategizer's website alone. So that doesn't include other places that it's been shared or other people's websites that are sharing it. So it's pretty cool. Like I said, it's a global phenomenon. People all over the world are using this this book and these tools in their classrooms, in their businesses, in government settings. So pretty neat. Here are just some fancy quotes from some people, some big companies, MasterCard and Toyota Financial Services, that are using the tool and how they've seen, a lot of amazing changes within their organizations. And then on the left side, those are our vanity logos of companies that we've helped. So another thing that's kind of interesting is that there is an iPad app where you can actually go onto and sketch out business model canvases. There's also a web application. I recently did a webinar introducing people to the web application. You can that'll be viewable actually on Strategizer's blog in the coming days. And then Strategizer also infrequently, but nonetheless, hosts a big conference called the Business Design Summit. And the idea is that we bring out folks who find themselves at kind of this convergence of business and design, and that's really pretty interesting. And the rest of the presentation, I'll talk more about what that really means to kind of design businesses and how you might do that. And then more recently, the Strategizer has come out with this tool, the Value Proposition Canvas, which is pretty neat. It takes a deep dive into 2 of the building blocks of the business model canvas, the value proposition building block and the customer segment building block, and we'll spend a good bit of time on this today. And that started a second book, the Value Proposition Design, or the Value Proposition Design book, which is a phenomenal book. It came out just this past October, I believe, and we've already seen widespread adoption of this book as well. People have already built entire university courses around it, and so it's pretty neat. So that's a quick intro to Strategizer and to who I am and why I'm here talking to you. The first question, the main question that I hope to resolve today for you is a couple of reasons why businesses fail, whether those be existing businesses or brand new businesses. I want to help you understand some really core reasons why businesses fail, either once they've already gotten up and off the ground, or why they fail to ever even launch. And the first one is that organizations, companies, they fail to create new value continuously. Now, what I mean by that is that they fail to create value for both customers and for their own businesses. So a recent study was done, and they studied a whole slew of startup companies, and they found that the #1 reason why startup companies fail is that they build something that nobody wants. Now that sounds silly. It sounds trivial, but it's true. There's so many companies, so many entrepreneurs, so many founders, and this goes for intrapreneurship as well. So entrepreneurs within existing organizations, within existing companies, and they set out to build something that sounds like a great idea, but in reality, there are no customers that are willing to pay for it. And then this, what I hope to communicate here is that in order for you to create value for your business, you've got to be creating value for a customer. So if there are no customers willing to buy your product or service, then you don't really have a company. But even if you do have customers that are willing to buy your product or service, on the right-hand side here, you see this quote: to sustainably create value for your customers, you need to be creating value for your business. So what we see all too often is that, let's say an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur has reached the point where they actually have customers that are willing to pay for their product. They forget to build a business model around it that can support and sustain and deliver that value proposition to customers, and then recapture value back into the business. And again, that sounds trivial, but it happens all of the time. Now, the interesting thing about this is that in order to design, interesting value propositions and business models, we need to, as I said, continuously create value. And the reason for that is that the dominant business models and value propositions of yesterday, well, they've expired. And I'll prove it to you. If we look at the music industry, for example, I mean, how many times has that business model and that value proposition expired just in the last 2 decades, right? And it kind of started with Napster. Napster, allowing people to upload and to download music for free. And then after that, with iTunes, and then now we've got streaming services such as Pandora and Spotify, and more recently, and just in maybe 6 months ago, with one of the most recent Apple reveal conferences, they actually distributed an entire album to all iTunes users, and that was in partnership with the band U2, who some of you might be familiar with. But U2 actually, in one day, sold more albums than anybody ever has before. And the way they did that was through a partnership with iTunes. Apple actually purchased a license to distribute their album to all of their users. And U2 actually made more money off of that licensing contract than they would have using the traditional business model of working through a big record label and promotion and distribution and concerts. And anyway, so we're seeing this business model and this value proposition changing very rapidly, multiple times over the last 20 years. So this business model is expiring ever faster. If we look at the book publishing industry, that business model has expired. If we look at the pharmaceutical industry, their business models, their value propositions are expiring. It's becoming increasingly more difficult to have a blockbuster drug that sells in the millions and even billions of dollars. So what about the industries that you are focused on? What about the industries that you're supporting and that you're looking at on a regular basis? Have they expired? So then the next area where we find businesses fail is that they fail to communicate properly about their business models and their value propositions, both externally to customers and to stakeholders, and internally to employees, to board members, to middle managers and top-level executives. There is a significant failure to communicate properly. And again, I'll prove it to you. So, oh, sorry, I apologize. So in a second here, we're going to watch a quick video, and just bear with me because the visual may not show up properly, but I at very least want you to hear the audio because I think you'll find it pretty comical, especially being in an engineering setting. I think you'll really relate to this. So give me a second here.
Hey, I've got a great idea for a business.
That's exciting. Tell me about it.
I've developed a chemical isomer that links to volatile organic compounds causing carbon bonds to rupture and wraps them in a nanotube coating.
Huh. That's a little confusing. Can you dumb it down for me?
Sure. What I do is I take a proprietary isomer that I developed with a picric acid wash that hollows out the carbon bonds and replaces them with a nanotube wrapping.
Okay, so I guess it's pretty technical.
Oh yeah. I've been working on this isomer for 9 years.
So what's the business idea?
To sell it.
To who?
Everybody will want one.
What for?
So they can wrap their volatile organic compounds in carbon nanotubes.
I think you might need a target customer. I don't think I need to wrap my compounds in your nanotube.
Well, maybe not you.
So, for people who buy it, what's the value you are providing them?
I've developed a chemical isomer that links to volatile organic compounds causing carbon bonds to rupture and wraps them in a nanotube coating.
You've said that already. This is getting annoying. Why should anyone care about your isomer?
I spent 9 years on this.
I know that. Okay, pretend I'm an investor. How can I make money off your product?
By selling it.
You're a smart guy, but try not to think like a scientist. Think like a business person.
Okay. Value chain. Term sheet.
I have to go now and answer that.
That's not your phone.
I know.
So hopefully you were able to find at least a little bit of comedy in that. But the point here is that in a business environment, in a business setting, or really in just any type of a cross-functional setting, or where we've got people with different backgrounds, coming from different walks of life, trying to communicate together about businesses and creating value for customers and for companies. There's this failure to communicate because we speak different languages. And even in a business setting, if I ask you the question, what's a business model? What's a value proposition? I ask that question in a lot of conferences and workshops, and inevitably I always get 10, 20, 30 different answers to that exact question. And people get pretty close, and some people will overlap their answers with others, but for the most part we don't really have a common language even in business to be able to talk about some of these very strategic conversations like what is our business model, what is our value proposition that we're offering to customers. And so we find ourselves in kind of this situation. And if you don't know what that picture is, that's a depiction of the Tower of Babel, right? The biblical account of the people in this city are trying to build a tower to get to heaven, and God decides to confound the languages of the people so that they can no longer communicate and be able to build this tower to get to heaven. So that's kind of how we find ourselves in an environment where we've got people coming from multiple different backgrounds, different walks of life, trying to communicate about how to create value for customers, how to deliver that value to customers, and how to recapture value back into our businesses through business models and through value propositions. So if this is something that maybe some of you have experienced before, but I experience this quite a bit when I'm sitting in around the conference table, so to speak, with a bunch of executives. Right, we're in a meeting, we're having a strategic conversation, and the CEO or whoever says, hey, so what are we going to do to stay relevant over the next 5 years? And some you got all these smart people sitting around a table, and some guy, right, says, well, I've got an idea. Let's go ahead and we're going to look at that new technology that's coming out of our R&D facility, and it's going to be awesome because blah 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 blah. And he goes on and he talks for a little bit, and then everybody else that's around the table kind of goes, huh? What are you talking about? And then somebody else decides, well, I think that we really ought to go, and we just did this big market research study, and we're going to go out there and we're going to attack this new market because it's growing at X percentage over the next 10 years and blah, 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 blah. And everybody around the table, again, kind of says, huh? What is this guy talking about? And this goes on and on and on for, 2-3 hours, and everybody comes out of that meeting not really knowing why they went into the meeting in the first place and coming out no smarter than they were when they came in. And we call this, in the business design community, the land of blah, 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 because that's really what it is. We just sit around a table, we sit in our conference rooms, we sit in our meetings, and we just blah, blah, blah about how to create value for customers and how to create value for our businesses. This comes to us from a phenomenal author, a colleague and a friend of ours, Dan Rome, who wrote a book titled Blah, 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 What to Do When Words Don't Work. And Dan Rome is famous for having said, any problem can be made clearer with a picture. And so as business designers, we really seek to use business tools that create the picture and the visual image of how we are creating value for our customers and how we're creating value for our businesses. The business model canvas is what we use to figure out how we're creating value for our business. The value proposition canvas tells us how we deliver value to our customers. And we have a whole series of tools here that allow us to map out the environment that our business model exists within, right? We want to understand market forces and industry forces, and we want to understand current trends and socioeconomic things that are going on around the business that we're creating. And then we also have some additional tools because we know that a business, isn't right the first time. What we set out to create on paper isn't always true. We have these testing and these learning cards, and we actually get out of the building, get out of the office or out of the lab, and we actually go talk to customers face to face, and we run experiments just like a scientist would, but in the context of a business. We run experiments, and we learn from those, and we iterate, and we change, and we pivot across our value propositions, across our businesses all the time. So these visual business tools help us to get beyond blah, blah, blah. They help us to get beyond that communication hurdle that we have. It allows everybody to come to the table with and share their ideas, and everybody can understand what's actually going on because it's happening in a visual language, in a visual format. So again, the business model environment helps you to understand the context that you're creating this business in. The business model canvas helps you to create value for your business, and the value proposition canvas helps you to create value for customers. And then the last thing is that businesses fail because they fail to evolve proactively. Okay? So what I mean by that is that a business needs to be proactively evaluating their business models and value propositions in the market, adapting them, evolving them, and changing over time. And there's a lot of really great companies out there that are constantly evolving their business models. If you look at Amazon, right? Amazon started by selling books. Then they got into e-commerce of lots and lots of things. But then somewhere along the way, they got into this thing called Amazon Web Services, where they're leveraging their IT and their software and their infrastructure that they've built around around their business, and they're offering web storage to small businesses and even big businesses. And then beyond that, they've now started getting into kind of the physical device game, right? They've got the Kindle Reader, the Amazon Fire, now they have a phone. They're starting to get into other things as well. So good, great companies that survive and that last proactively evaluate, adapt, and evolve their business models and their value propositions over time in response to the market, or even more proactively before the market even tells them they need to. And to do this, we have to be constantly zooming in and zooming out of our business models and value propositions. Okay? So it's this constant back and forth between the business model, between your value propositions, between the context that you're creating value within. So now what I want to do is to introduce you to kind of the suite of tools that I just described a second ago, and kind of describe to you how we use these in a setting of designing a business, whether that be a startup, or whether that be a student project in the classroom, or whether that be a new business venture inside of a big Fortune 500 company. So the first tool that I mentioned to you comes from this book, The Business Model Generation, and that's the business model canvas. And first, we need to define what a business model is. So a business model describes the rationale for how an organization is creating value for customers, how they're delivering value to customers, and how they're capturing value back into their organization. And the business model canvas, this tool, describes that in a very simple way. In the middle, you see the building block value proposition, right? So this is the bundle of products and services that we're offering to customers. And then on the far right there, we have customer segments. Those are the groups of people that we're actually creating and delivering value to. Between those two boxes, with that, where that little truck icon is in the upper right corner, we have channels. So this is the way that we are reaching customers with our offer and how we're actually delivering that offer to them. Just above that little heart icon is customer relationships. So these are the relationships that our customers expect us to start, keep, and maintain with them over time. And then at the very bottom right there, we see revenue streams. And so this is how, as an organization, we bring revenue or money into the organization. And I don't care if you're a government entity or a nonprofit or a for-profit company, you have to have more money coming into the organization than is going out. Otherwise, your organization is not sustainable. Now, if we move to just left of that value proposition building block in the middle, we see key resources here. And key resources are basically all the resources that are needed to be able to create, deliver, and capture value. And then just above that is key activities. These are all of the activities that you must perform in a business to do the same things, right? To create, deliver, and capture value. Now, we know that organizations don't necessarily control all of the resources, nor do they perform all of the activities. And so on the far left, we see key partners who might be supplying some of the resources and performing some of the activities for the business in the effort to create and deliver value to customers. And those things make up the infrastructure of the business, which lead to, at the bottom left, a cost structure for being able to do that. Okay? So now, if we look at the business model canvas and we zoom into the value proposition building blocks, which I'll show you with that little gift there, right there in the center, and the customer segment building blocks, which will use that face to kind of show you, we then get the value proposition canvas. Okay, and the value proposition canvas comes to us from Strategizer's new book, Value Proposition Design, as I mentioned earlier. And in the book, they define a value proposition as the benefits that customers can expect from a bundle of products and services. So if we think about a vehicle, and that vehicle has a seat warmer in it, well, the value proposition is not the seat warmer. The seat warmer is simply the product, right? The value proposition is the actual benefit that a customer gets from the product or from the seat warmer. So it's not the seat warmer, it's the warm butt that customers care about, right? So in order to design a great value proposition, it starts with a deep understanding of the customer. And to get that deep understanding of the customer, we use the value proposition canvas. So the value proposition canvas, as I mentioned, is kind of the deep dive into the customer segment building block and the value proposition building block, the value proposition that you're offering to customers. And your canvas is made up of 6 building blocks. On the right-hand side, when we observe the customer segment, we want to understand the jobs that customers are trying to get done, whether that's in their daily life or in their work life. It doesn't matter, but your customer has certain jobs that they're trying to get done, whether those be functional jobs or emotional jobs or social jobs. They're trying to get a job done in their life. And in trying to get those jobs done, they encounter certain pains just to the left and down from the jobs building block. They encounter certain pains with getting those jobs done, and they're seeking certain gains as a result of doing those jobs. And so as a business, right, or as an organization, we need to design a value proposition that speaks to that customer, okay? And that value proposition, yes, is going to consist of the products and services that we're offering, but also the pain relievers that those products and services provide and the gain creators that those products and services provide, which make up the total value proposition that's being offered to a customer segment. And ultimately, what we're really looking for is the fit between the value proposition and the customer segment. Now, we're going to observe the customer profile and we're going to create a value proposition. But again, what we're looking for is that there's an actual fit between what we're offering to customers and what customers actually want. Remember at the beginning I said that one of the #1 reasons why businesses fail is that they fail to create something that customers actually care about. They build crap nobody wants, okay? So you must find a fit between the value proposition that you're creating and hoping to deliver to customers and the actual jobs, pains, and gains that customers have. Now again, that sounds trivial, but we see it all the time. More than 50% of the time, this is why businesses fail, okay? Now, this idea of jobs, and the reason we focus on jobs, some of you might recognize this gentleman, Clayton Christensen. He's a Harvard professor, and he is famous for the concept of disruptive innovation. You may have read some of his books, The Innovator's Dilemma, The Innovator's Solution, right? So he's got a whole series of books around this concept of disruptive innovation. And Clay Christensen with some of his colleagues, Bob Moesta and Tony Ulwick, they set out to understand what really drives customer behavior. And what they found is this idea of jobs, that customers actually hire products to do things for them, to do a job for them, okay? Now that sounds interesting, and you can actually watch a whole video on this if you just look up on YouTube, Clay Christensen Milkshake. He gives this whole example of when they went into a consult with and help one of the big fast food chains to increase the sales of their milkshakes. And it's a pretty phenomenal story, and it will help you to understand the jobs concept a little bit better. But then Tony Ulwick says that the focus should be on what jobs customers are trying to get done. And if we can address the jobs customers are trying to get done, then we will be equipped to create a much higher quality product or service, and ultimately a much greater value proposition to that customer, okay? Now, we might be able to design a phenomenal value proposition, and we can sketch out a great value proposition canvas even, but we need to remember that we first observe who the customer is before we set out to design a value proposition, okay? And again, it's all about the fit between the value proposition and the customer segment. Now, sometimes we encounter this situation where we have what's called multiple fits. Now, I'll give you the example of Airbnb. They have a value proposition that speaks to both customers who are renting a place to stay, as well as people who have excess rooms in, whether that's in their house or their apartment or whatever. they have this excess space that they want to rent out to customers. Okay, so they actually have two value propositions or multiple fits that they have to find within their business model. So it's kind of interesting. Now, I need you to understand, though, that a value proposition has to have a business model that can deliver it. Without that, it's just a great value proposition, and you don't really have a business yet. You don't really have an organization that can support and sustain this value proposition that you're creating and trying to deliver to customers. You have to have a business model that can deliver the value proposition. Okay? So if we look at our canvas, right, we remember that that fits or that plugs straight into the business model canvas in a very clear way. Okay? Now, as you're building a business, a new business, we're really looking for not just a fit between the value proposition and the customer segment. There's actually three kinds of fit that we're seeking. The first type of fit is problem-solution fit that you see there at the bottom, number one. And that's really about understanding who is my customer, what do they need, and do we have a solution that satisfies the problems that they have. So that's the first, problem-solution fit. The second type of fit is what we call product-market fit. So sometimes, yeah, you might have a solution that solves the customer's problem, but maybe it's not the right solution. And maybe customers aren't willing to pay for that solution. Maybe there's a better solution out there that gets the job done better for those customers. And so we really need to seek to move towards what's called product market fit. And that's when we actually have customers that are willing to pay us for our solution. Now, even if you have customers willing to pay you for a solution, you know, all is not done, right? You haven't built a repeatable, sustainable, profitable business. You need to move towards business model fit in that we have created a business model that can sustainably create the value proposition for customers, deliver it to them, and then recapture value back into the business, and not just recapture value into the business, but recapture value into the business at a rate that is greater than the costs that are required to create the value proposition in the first place. Okay? So the way that we go through this whole process of, you know, of learning what customers want, designing a value proposition for them, designing a business model, we use customer development and lean startup. Now, some of you will be familiar with that, and what's interesting about these methodologies is that they're not just for startup businesses. These are just as good for big, ongoing, companies that are an ongoing concern, large enterprises, small businesses, doesn't matter. These methods, these tools work. So as you're thinking about your students in your classroom who are either going to be going out and starting their own businesses, or more than likely they're going to be going and working inside of an existing organization, having this skill of entrepreneurship, having the skill of being able to design a business is so imperative today, right? Business models and value propositions are expiring, as I mentioned, so much faster today than they ever have before. And the employee, the executives of the future, are the ones who are equipped with the skills, with the tools to be able to navigate that uncertain environment. And these are the tools, these are the methods to do that. So what customer development is all about is simply, right, we've got this idea for a business, and we want to take this idea from, $0 today to, into being $1 million business, somewhere, or maybe $1 billion business in the future, right? And the road to get there is not linear like I showed you. It's actually more squiggly like this, right? There's a lot of back and forths, ups and downs, diagonals, slantways, crossways, right? You don't just get there to building that, massive enterprise that's repeatable, that's sustainable, that's profitable overnight. You have to experiment. You have to go through this series of trials and errors. And I know that this is contrary to what most people learn in business school, right? In business school, they teach you, just write a business plan and get out there and execute the plan. But that's not actually true. Steve Blank, the guy who's famous for creating the whole customer development methodology, says no business plan ever survived first contact with customers. And that's absolutely true. I've seen that over and over and over again, both in my own businesses and in the businesses that I consult and that I coach and mentor. Okay? So we need to be burning the business plan, and we need to set out first to search for a customer, to search for a value proposition that solves the problem that they have, and search for a business model that's going to be repeatable, sustainable, and profitable. And to do that, we go through this series of designing multiple new alternatives and then testing those alternatives in the market before we ever get into execution of the business. Okay? And so in the beginning, you'll find yourself creating dozens and dozens and dozens of business models and value propositions, and eventually, as you test those in the market, you eventually converge upon a business model and a value proposition that's going to work, right? And so we have this series of designing and testing, right? We start in this design phase where we're generating numerous alternatives, where we're learning about customers, we're observing them, we're learning what they want, we're designing value propositions, we're designing business models, and then we're getting out into the market and we're actually testing those business models and value propositions. And we do that in kind of a cyclical loop until we've converged upon that business model, those value propositions that are going to work. Okay? So a business model or a value proposition might look great on paper, just like a business plan does, but in reality, it's just a set of guesses, just a big hypothesis or hypotheses that need to be tested in the market with real customers, with real stakeholders, with partners, with legislators. We have to be testing our business models and our value propositions constantly. And so the customer development process is outlined into kind of 4 steps. We start with customer discovery and customer validation as the first 2 steps, and that makes up our search phase. In customer discovery, we're trying to find customers and what problems they're having, and then we're trying to identify possible solutions that could resolve those problems. And then we move into customer validation, which is into the testing mode. We're actually trying to validate that customers are willing to pay for the solution that we've got, and they're willing to pay for it in some form of a scarce resource, whether that's through their time, referrals to friends and family, other colleagues, through actual hard green cash, right? And then we move into, once we've validated that we have customers, then we move into trying to scale up the creation of customers and into building the actual enterprise, the actual company, okay? Now, to do that, to go through that whole search phase, that whole search and execution phase, we use 2 tools, as I mentioned earlier, this test card and this learning card. So what are we testing? We're testing first the circle, right? We want to provide evidence that customers, that customers have these jobs, these pains, these gains, and then we want to focus on how to help them, which is the square. So we start testing the square. We start testing our value propositions, whether or not our value propositions speak to customers, whether or not they actually alleviate pains that they have and create the gains that our customers are seeking. And then after that, we're going to test the rectangle, right? We're going to test the business model. We're going to see if we can actually create, deliver, and capture value in a way that's repeatable and sustainable and profitable. So once we've designed and sketched our business models and our value propositions, we're going to look at them and we're going to extract the hypotheses. We're going to look at the big fat assumptions that we're making in our businesses, and we're going to turn those assumptions into testable hypotheses. We're going to prioritize those hypotheses into, the biggest business killer assumptions first, all the way down to the most minor nuances last. And we want to set out to test the biggest business killers first, because otherwise we're just wasting time and energy testing things that don't matter nearly as much. And so we're going to design experiments, we're going to design tests with the test card, and then we're going to prioritize those tests. Then we're going to run tests via Lean Startup, the build, measure, learn feedback loop. So we're going to build the experiment, we're going to run it, we're going to measure that, and we're going to learn from it, and we're going to capture those learnings with the learning card. So the testing process looks something like this. We start by sketching out a business model, a value proposition. We then extract the hypotheses. Then we design our tests. Then we do the build, measure, learn feedback loop, the learning loop. And then we capture those learnings and determine what our next actions are. So if we've validated, if we have invalidated the test or the hypothesis or the assumption that we were making, then we need to iterate or pivot. If we're uncertain about the outcome of that experiment, then we need to test more, right? Maybe we need to redesign the experiment or something like that. If we have validated the assumption or the hypothesis, then we can start moving towards the next element within the customer development cycle, and we begin measuring our progress against that. To measure that progress, we can look at this kind of spectrum here, where in the beginning we design an idea, right? We sketch out a business model and a value proposition there at the far left. And then the next step, right, we assess that with the competition out in the market, right? And that gets back to kind of that context or that business model environment map. We then will go through customer discovery, which is the first step of customer development. And essentially what we're looking to do there, if you can see that in that third column, is that we're really looking to validate the circle, right? Who is this customer? What are their problems? What are their jobs, pains, gains? And then we start validating interest. We start getting that customer to get into our funnel, and we want to validate that there's interest for our solution now. We want to validate their preferences the preferences that they have for our solution, and then we need to validate whether or not they are willing and able to pay for that solution. So then once we've validated that we have a customer that's ready and willing to pay for this solution, then we've achieved what's called product market fit. So we've essentially green lighted or checked off that we validated the circle, we've now validated the square, and then next we need to start validating the rectangle, right? We need to start figuring out, how do we scale up this business? How do we create more customers? How do we sustainably, repeatably create and deliver and capture value back into our organization? Okay. And then lastly, you're going to start designing and building the actual company. I'm just going to skip this a little bit. Now, you can do that using we do this with organizations using a Kanban board, and if you're not familiar with that, just look it up. It's a pretty simple method for prioritizing your roadmap, so to speak, and the tests that you need to run, the experiments that you need to run, and you're going to be doing this all the while you are designing and prototyping a solution, whether that's a physical product or whether that's a service, but you're constantly designing, testing, iterating, and you can do that and prioritize that using, and this is available to you in the Value Proposition Design book, but a progress board or a Kanban board. So some further resources for you. As I mentioned, you can get a copy. You can get a free PDF download of these canvases for free at strategizer.com/canvas. You can also get a free copy, a free section of each of those books on Strategizer's website, strategizer.com/books. You can also purchase the books, the whole book there. Now, one of the interesting things about the Value Proposition Design book is that every single spread, every single 2 pages, there is a unique URL or web page that you can go to and download additional resources and tools that you can use in your classrooms, right? These are posters, these are exercises and activities that you can actually do whether you're building a business or whether you're teaching this to students in the classroom. And like I said, we've already had people that have designed entire curriculums using the tools and the methods and the resources that are there in that value proposition design book, as well as we've had for the business model generation as well. You can actually design business models digitally using the Strategizer web app. And now I want to go ahead and open it up to any questions that we may have had during the presentation.
Thank you, Benson. So to ask Benson questions, use your control panel's question entry box. And to start, can you share the example of how you use value proposition design in your PhD course?
Yeah, so I only teach one course, and then I help some of my colleagues in the courses that they teach, at least at the university. But the PhD course that I teach is a 7-week course, and the beginning of the course, in the first 2 weeks, I actually have students sketching out business model canvases and value proposition canvases around a hypothetical idea that they've got. Now these are solar, and they're getting a PhD in solar energy, and so they're solar engineers essentially, and they engineer solar panels and things like that. But so they actually sketch out business models and value propositions around a concept or around a business idea that they've got for a solar company. Now, these, again, are hypothetical. These are not necessarily businesses that these PhD candidates are actually going to pursue, although after this course we've actually had some of them decide that they wanted to kind of quit academia, so to speak, and pursue the business that they explored. But then after those first 2 weeks, we actually get them to do exactly that whole process that I just shared with you. They extract the assumptions around those businesses, around those value propositions, and they actually get out, and they're required to interview customers and stakeholders in these potential businesses during those 7 weeks, and they actually also have to design a legitimate experiment. So one of the teams that we had, they developed a landing page for that essentially communicated what their core value proposition was, and they collected email addresses of people that were interested in this, in the service that they were offering. And so that was just one quick experiment that they ran and essentially the only thing they were testing at that stage was whether or not people had an interest in the value proposition that they were proposing. And they came to that value proposition after a whole slew of interviews with potential customers and stakeholders in that business. So in 7 weeks, we actually have students going through at least a first iteration of that entire cycle that I shared with you. So pretty cool. We've also, with some of my colleagues, we've also designed entire semester courses that are more like 15 weeks long, and some people have actually designed entire 1-year capstone type projects where students actually have to get out and build an actual business. They actually have to launch a company during that school year, during that senior year. So pretty interesting, pretty cool.
Okay, I have a comment and question for you. This presentation is very interesting and extremely engaging. Thanks for that. There seem to be enough resources and tools to create an entire course or discipline out of the concepts. Can you recommend the best way to incorporate these resources and tools into a condensed 2 through 3 week engineering class project, especially for students that are focused on being entrepreneurs? And Benson, we only have a couple more minutes, and I know this is a pretty big question.
Yep, that is a big question. So I would start with the value proposition design book. I would say in week 1, what I would have them do is sketch out a value proposition and a business model. Just have them read up on it in the value proposition design book as their homework or something like that. In week In week 2, I would probably have them extracting hypotheses and designing potential experiments. So we would kind of go through, just in a very quick way, an iteration of kind of prioritizing hypotheses, prioritizing assumptions, and then designing a whole set of alternative experiments to test the riskiest, say top one or two assumptions that they're making. And per each assumption, I would have them, generate, 5 to 10 possible experiments. And this is a very quick exercise, right? They just take that test card and they literally just sketch out an idea for an experiment that they could run. It's not something they have to run. They're just generating ideas. And then they're prioritizing those experiments based on the ones that they think are the most feasible, the ones that they're going to get the most learning out of. And then I would say that between weeks 2 and 3, they actually have to go out and test those. They actually have to go run the experiment. And in addition to that, I would suggest that you also have them interview, maybe 5 to 10 customers and stakeholders. And then in that week 3 of that project, they're essentially reporting out on what they learned in the entire 3 weeks. So I would actually force them to go through the whole process just at a much more rapid pace, and maybe not in as much detail as you would if you had 7 weeks or an entire semester or an entire year. But they could easily get through one cycle of that, even if it's just very rough and very rudimentary. They're still going to see the value and see the benefit of designing, business alternatives in this way and getting out of the building, getting out of the lab, and testing that with real, human beings.
Thanks, Benson. We just had a few more comments say that this is a great presentation, so we really appreciate you giving this presentation. Benson, do you mind putting your contact information up on the screen again?
Oh, yeah. I have that here. So you can reach me at benson@bensongarner.com. I have a very unique name, so if you just look up Benson Garner on Google, you'll find me on just about every social media channel. You'll find my website. You'll find various ways of contacting me. Just like I said, just look up Benson Garner online. You'll find ways. But my Twitter handle is @BensonGarner. You can schedule a call with me on using that link there. My email address is benson@bensongarner.com, and those are all the various ways that you can reach me. And as I mentioned, I'm more than happy to jump on a quick call with you guys if you'll just, like I said, schedule a call. Happy to answer any questions that you might have following up. Maybe you go grab the Value Proposition Design book and you read through it, and now you've got all sorts of questions about, how would I implement this into my classroom. Like I said, just schedule a call with me. Happy to talk through that with you.
Cool. Thanks so much, Benson. And thanks to the participants for tuning in. Yeah. So our next webinar is on April 23rd at 12 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. Charles Kim and Joe Tranquillo from Bucknell and Brian Bollinger from Ohio Northern will be discussing topical grant deliverables relating to K-WIDE. And Benson, before we close out, is there anything that you want to leave the audience with?
No, just thanks for joining us, and I have had so much fun working with students in the classroom, implementing these ideas, these tools, these methodologies. They're so visual that anybody, it doesn't matter what their background is, can pick up these tools and use them. So don't be afraid to just dive right in. Your students will get this. They will understand it, and they will have a lot of fun doing it.
Great. Well, that's it for this webinar. Everyone have a great rest of your day. Thanks, Benson.
Thank you. Take care.